Today we're diving into something pretty incredible, one of the most famous historical texts on the planet, the Gospel of Matthew. But listen, we're not just going to read this like some basic biography of Jesus of Nazareth. Based on our source material, that's not at all how it was designed to be read. Instead, we're going to look at it like a meticulously constructed legal dossier. Seriously, it's this comprehensive, carefully built presentation with one massive objective: to actually prove legally and historically that Jesus is the prophesied king, the Messiah, and the Savior of the world. It's a brilliantly persuasive argument, and we're going to break down exactly how it works. Let's get right into it. Okay, here's a quick look at our agenda. We'll be going through 1. The target audience, 2. The royal ancestry, 3. The new Moses, 4. Fulfilling ancient prophecies, and finally, 5. The Great Commission.
Starting off with Section 1, the target audience, building the case for Israel. To really understand any solid legal argument, you first got to understand who the jury is, right? The author here is Matthew, also known as Levi, and he was a tax collector. Now, nobody liked tax collectors back then, but here's the thing. They were the ultimate record keepers. We're talking meticulous, hyper-organized, detail-obsessed bureaucrats. That makes Matthew the absolute perfect guy to present a highly structured, evidence-based case, and his jury, skeptical Jewish believers and other Jews who were just starting to weigh Jesus' claims. A nice, heartwarming story wouldn't work on them at all. They needed hard proof that perfectly aligned with the law of Moses and the really intense messianic expectations of that time.
So, what's the central, burning question Matthew has to answer for this highly specific audience? It's simply this: is Jesus truly the Mashiach? Mashiach is the Hebrew word for anointed one, which, by the way, translates to Christos in Greek. So, is Jesus really the long-awaited king that the Old Testament promised? Our sources show that Matthew's answer, laid out across this entire dossier, is a massive, heavily documented yes.
Let's move to Section 2, the royal ancestry, proving the right to the throne.
This brings us to the very first piece of evidence in Matthew's dossier, and he places it right at the beginning for maximum impact. Put yourself in his shoes for a second. How do you actually prove a king's legitimacy to a deeply historical, incredibly skeptical culture? Where do you even start? Well, you can't just talk about his good character or his moral teachings. Legally speaking, you've got to pull out the family tree. The bloodline is quite literally everything.
Right out of the gate, in chapter 1, verse 1, Matthew calls Jesus the son of David, the son of Abraham. He is directly connecting Jesus to the founding fathers of Israel to establish absolute royal and covenantal legitimacy. Think about it. As the son of David, he has the legal right to the eternal throne promised back in 2 Samuel. And as the son of Abraham, he's the promised seed from Genesis, the one through whom all nations on earth would eventually be blessed. So, this genealogy, it isn't just a boring list of hard-to-pronounce names, it's foundational legal proof.
Okay, Section 3, the new Moses, the ultimate lawgiver.
Once the bloodline is locked in, Matthew still has to win over an audience that is entirely devoted to the law of Moses. Actually, many scholars point out that Matthew likely structured his entire book around 5 major teachings specifically to mirror the 5 books of Moses. He deliberately constructs these brilliant side-by-side historical parallels. Look at this. Moses escaped a wicked king, Pharaoh, who was killing infants, right? Well, Jesus escaped a wicked king, Herod, doing the exact same thing. Moses came out of Egypt. Jesus was called out of Egypt. Moses delivered God's law on Mount Sinai. Jesus delivered his definitive teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. Moses mediated the Old Covenant, while Jesus is presented as the mediator of the New Covenant. You see what he's doing here? Matthew is structuring his narrative to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus isn't just another prophet. He's the definitive new Moses.
Moving on to Section 4, fulfilling ancient prophecies, the burden of proof. Look, if you're going to claim someone is the prophesied Messiah, the burden of proof is staggeringly high. You need hard data. And here's the core thesis of Matthew's entire methodology, the phrase, that it might be fulfilled. This incredibly specific phrase acts like a recurring drumbeat throughout the whole text. Matthew plays the role of the ultimate record keeper perfectly. He lays out an ancient prophecy and then, bam, immediately slams down the historical event that fulfills it, locking the evidence firmly into place.
Let's look at a rapid-fire example of how this methodology works in action. The Jewish people back then knew the ancient scriptures by heart. They absolutely knew the prophecy from Micah chapter 5, which explicitly stated that the ruler over Israel would come out of the small town of Bethlehem. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was an absolute, non-negotiable requirement for the Messiah.
And boom, Matthew chapter 2 immediately presents the historical fulfillment.
The dossier confirms Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, explicitly checking off that major geographical requirement for the Messiah. One big box checked.
But Matthew certainly doesn't stop at geography. He tackles the famous and frankly highly specific prophecy from Isaiah chapter 7, that a virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. I mean, talk about a staggering requirement to fulfill, right? And once again, Matthew brings the receipts. Chapter 1 confirms this exact event, proving that Jesus succeeds precisely where the ancient prophecies dictate, right down to the virgin birth. He emphasizes that Jesus is Emmanuel, which translates to God with us. Our sources list literally dozens of these direct fulfillments in Matthew's text. It covers everything from his healing ministry to being betrayed for exactly 30 pieces of silver, all the way to the specific, agonizing details of his crucifixion and resurrection.
Finally, we reach Section 5, the Great Commission, expanding the horizons.
Now, up until the very end of Matthew's account, the focus has been intensely Jewish. It's all been about the law, the prophets, and the throne of David. But in the final chapter, we see this breathtaking shift. Matthew starts hyper-local with the promised seed of Abraham. Throughout the middle chapters, the focus stays entirely on the ministry to Israel, fulfilling those local messianic expectations. But by the time we hit the climax in Matthew 28, the narrative just completely zooms out. Those specifically Jewish roots suddenly blossom into a universal message. The Great Commission extends the scope, turning the seed of Abraham into the Savior of all nations.
This massive shift is anchored by this staggering quote from Jesus right after the resurrection. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. According to Matthew's case, by the time we reach this point, the king has officially been enthroned. He's proven his victory over death, he's been accepted by the Father, and now he's claiming authority, not just over the nation of Israel, but literally over the entire world. The explainer that began with a local family tree ends with a universal declaration of reign.
Matthew didn't just write a biography for us to sit back and passively read. He wrote a highly persuasive dossier demanding a verdict. So, the ultimate question is this: if this ancient, meticulously structured, heavily Jewish-focused case file ultimately concludes by declaring universal authority and demanding the submission of all nations to this king, what does that dossier demand of you today?